The scorched and jagged lands of Azeroth's burning steppes surround the troops as they make their way up a hill, hoping to get to help their brothers in arms in time to not lose the war. Towering cliffs loom on either side, casting long shadows over the gathered forces of Alexandros Mograine. The air is thick with the scent of ash and battle, the distant clash of steel ringing faintly over the hills. Suddenly, a breathless soldier crests the ridge, his armor scorched and battered. He delivers grim news. Warchief Doomhammer's horde has overrun the Alliance's forward positions, and even now Commander Lothar and Lord Uther are locked in desperate combat. Alexandros Mograine rises, his face set in grim determination. With a voice that cuts through the clamor like a blade, he roars, "Ready yourselves, men. If it is blood these green-skinned heathens crave, then blood they shall have. Come, you knights, raise your hammers, bear your steel. We fight to the end, we die if we must. For Lordaeron, for the king." With a rallying cry that surges through the ranks like wildfire, Mograine draws his weapon and charges over the hill, his forces thundering behind him. The ground shakes beneath their boots as they storm into the heart of battle, a defiant line of shining armor and unwavering resolve, determined to carve their stand into the books of history. The battlefield erupts in a maelstrom of violence. Orcs snarl and swing jagged axes. Ogres lumber forward with brutal clubs, and Alliance soldiers fight tooth and nail in a desperate last stand. Every clash of steel, every cry of the wounded echoes the truth. If they fall here, the war is lost, and the orcs will seize the human kingdoms. Amidst the chaos, a frantic messenger rides through to Alexandros, breathless with urgency. "High Lord, Horde forces are circling to the west. We'll be outflanked if we don't act now." Without a moment's hesitation, Alexandros tightens his grip on his weapon. "Rally what men we can spare. We hold the western flank at all costs." Leading a contingent of soldiers, he spurs his horse toward the embattled flank, the thunder of hooves pounding beside him. Just as they near the collapsing line, a towering ogre lunges from the fray, its massive club swinging downward in a bone-crushing arc. Alexandros barely ducks in time, the wind of the strike roaring past him as he wheels around, eyes burning with unshakable resolve. Suddenly, without warning, another ogre barrels toward him, its club raised high, ready to bring it down in a deadly arc. But before the beast can finish its attack, it stiffens and lets out a guttural gasp, collapsing forward with a thunderous crash. From behind the fallen brute, Tyrion Fordring steps into view, his sword buried deep in the ogre's neck, thrown with expert precision. "You grow careless in your old age, Alexandros," Tyrion calls out with a roguish grin. "I won't always be around to watch your back." Alexandros lets out a hearty laugh, flashing a grin over his shoulder. "I would have felled the brute soon enough, brother Tyrion. You've gone and ruined my sport." With a warm chuckle, Tyrion responds, "You're welcome," as Alexandros gallops away, his focus shifting once more to the fray ahead, the unyielding front where the fate of nations would soon be decided. As Alexandros arrives at the western flank, he is wide-eyed as he sees a warlock in front of him clad in a dark robe, channeling fell magic. With his sinister sweep, the warlock unleashes a blast that reduces a cluster of Alliance soldiers to ash, their screams snuffed out in a blinding flash. Alexandros jerks the reins, bringing his horse to a sharp halt. Without wasting a heartbeat, he turns to the soldiers atop the hill. "Ballistas, target the warlock. Do not engage directly," he commands, his voice sharp and resolute. The soldiers scramble to obey, releasing heavy bolts that streak through the air and strike true. With a violent impact, the warlock is crushed beneath the assault, the force of the hit sending his dark artifact, the strange orb he clutched, clattering to the ground, rolling to a stop just before Alexandros. He dismounts cautiously, eyes fixed on the pulsing relic. "Never before have I beheld an artifact of such power," he murmurs half to himself. "If only it could be commanded by the light. What army could stand against it? Surely in the right hands." Without hesitation, Alexandros reaches out, his fingers brushing the orb's surface. In an instant, searing energy courses through him, and he jerks back with a cry of pain. His hand, once strong and steady, is now blackened and charred, reduced to a useless, ruined appendage. Gritting his teeth, he summons the healing light, but the divine magic flickers and fades, unable to mend the damage. A dwarf priest hurries to his side, laying glowing hands upon the wound, only to shake his head grimly. "This is no mere battle scar, High Lord. It's an instrument of evil. Best leave it be." Alexandros gazes down at his ruined hand, his jaw tight, eyes burning with a mixture of anger and unshakable resolve. "No," he murmurs under his breath. We will not leave it be. Years after the Second War came to a close, a fragile peace settled across the lands. But on a world shaped by war, peace is never more than a fleeting visitor. During those quiet years, Alexandros kept the mysterious dark orb locked away in an iron-bound chest within his home. Yet curiosity knows no barriers, and one fateful day he found his two sons, Darian and Renault, daring each other to touch the very object he had so fiercely hidden. As Alexandros stepped into the room, his voice thundered before either boy could lay a hand on it. Darian blurted out, "It was Renault's fault," to which Renault sneered, calling his younger brother a little cockroach. Alexandros raised a hand, his tone sharp and cutting through their squabbling. "Enough! I'm disappointed in you most of all, Renault. The orb of all things? Haven't I always told you to protect Darian, to look out for him?" His eyes softened for a moment, but his command remained firm. "Both of you, to your rooms, now." The boy skulked away, leaving Alexandros alone in the dimly lit room. With a heavy sigh, he locked the iron chest once more, securing the dangerous artifact within. Then he stepped outside to the small gravestone nestled before the house, the final resting place of his beloved wife, Elena. Kneeling there, Alexandros spoke softly, his voice tinged with exhaustion and longing. "Oh, how they test me sometimes, my love. But you would be proud of them, and shocked at how much they've grown. Renault, in so many ways, reminds me of myself. Brash, headstrong, aggressive. And Darian, he's so much like you. He has your quiet strength. I see it in him even now." His voice faltered slightly as he reached out to trace the engraved name. "I wish you could have known him. I miss you, Elena, more with every passing day. I miss your unshakable faith. I miss the light that danced in your eyes. I pray with all my heart that you found eternal peace." A voice gently pulled Alexandros from his thoughts. "Am I interrupting, old friend?" came the familiar tone of Fairbanks. Without turning from the gravestone, Alexandros let a small, knowing smile touch his face. "Just tending the garden, Fairbanks. How does the day find you?" Fairbanks gave a wry chuckle. Sore. The human frame was not meant to straddle a giant beast for extended periods of time. Alexandros smirked, still gazing at Elena's name. Yes. I've heard the 2-mile journey from Capital City can be quite a grueling one. What news?" The humor faded from Fairbanks' voice. "Grim developments in the northern provinces. Sickness, disease, death. Some unnatural plague. Those who perish rise again, twisted and unholy, bringing ruin upon the living." He exhaled slowly. "They are calling it the Scourge. Lord Uther himself is aiding Prince Arthas and Lady Jaina Proudmoore to quell the threat. But so far they've had no success. As your advisor, Alexandros, I recommend we prepare to intercede if necessary." Alexandros rose to his feet, his expression now hardened with resolve. "Yes, Fairbanks. There's a discussion I've been meaning to have for some time." A few days later, at a quiet inn in South Shore, 5 men gathered in the warm glow of the firelight. The faint scent of sea air drifted through the timber beams as the flames from the hearth danced across the walls, casting flickering shadows. At the head of a long rectangular table sat Alexandros Mograine, his presence commanding even in this private setting. High General Abendis sat to his left, with Fairbanks beside him. Across from them sat Asilian, his short red spiked hair catching the light, and Doan, his bald head gleaming beneath the torchlight, his thick red beard connecting seamlessly into his sideburns. The mood in the room was tense, each man weighed down by the grim reports from the north. It was Fairbanks who broke the silence, his voice low but steady. "Recent reports paint a gruesome portrait. The ranks of the Scourge continue to grow, adding to their numbers with each and every kill." Abendis responded, dismissing the concern. Fairbanks, in his view, had always been an alarmist. But before the conversation could spiral further, Alexandros spoke firmly, cutting through the tension. He reminded them that this was no time for dismissiveness. The Scourge was a threat too great to ignore, and it was the duty of the Knights of the Silver Hand to do everything in their power to eradicate it. That, he declared, was why he had summoned them here. Doan leaned forward, narrowing his eyes slightly. His voice carried a note of skepticism. "And you would have us believe this artifact of yours presents a solution? I must confess my astonishment that you've kept it all this time, Alexandros, especially considering what it did to you." All eyes turned to Mograine as he calmly met their gazes. "The artifact is indeed a relic beyond my understanding, Brother Doan. It is a living embodiment of shadow, a void. But I have always believed, that the possibility exists to forge it into a weapon of righteousness. After all, can good exist without evil? Can there be light without dark? They are two sides of the same coin, gentlemen. The weight of Alexandros' words hung in the air, as each man contemplated the dangerous yet undeniable logic behind his conviction. Asilian scoffed at Alexandros' idea, calling it nonsense as he raised his hands and unleashed a crackling lightning spell at the orb, confident he could destroy it easily. To his shock, the orb absorbed the spell effortlessly, shimmering without so much as a scratch. Unseen above in the rafters, Darian and Renault watched wide-eyed, their presence unnoticed by their father and the gathered men below. "I maintain that the orb may be used for good," Alexandros said with quiet confidence. Doan nodded thoughtfully. "It has begun to glow. Perhaps there is something to this after all, Alexandros. And at the very least, it is worth further exploration." The men decided to test a theory, and each man raised a hand toward the orb, concentrating their energy. Before their astonished eyes, the blackened surface of the orb shifted, its color transforming, glowing not with shadow, but with the radiant light of the holy light itself. A surge of warmth filled Alexandros' chest, and with a gasp, he felt something he hadn't in years. His long mangled hand, the one no healer could mend, was whole once more. "So it will be. From this blessed crystal we will forge a weapon to cast down the undead," Alexandros proclaimed, his voice firm with renewed purpose. A voice sounded from behind them, smooth and authoritative. "You may just need such a weapon." The men turned sharply to see Saidan Dothrahan, the leader of their order, stepping into the room. His face was grave. "The situation grows worse by the hour. Prince Arthas has taken the drastic step of attempting to contain the plague within Stratholme by purging the city. Men, women, and children, all slaughtered. When Uther tried to stop him, Arthas accused him of treason and suspended the service of the paladins. The men around the table erupted in outrage, voices overlapping, demanding they speak to the prince. But Dothrahan raised a hand. "It's too late. Even as we speak, Arthas sails for Northrend. Officially, we are to do nothing and wait while Uther seeks counsel with King Tyrannus. But unofficially, we will explore every option available to wipe out the Scourge entirely." Before they adjourned, Dothrahan turned to Alexandros. "Tell me, Alexandros, who do you know that is capable of forging this orb into a weapon we can wield?" Alexandros knew of a dwarf weaponsmith who could forge such a weapon, and as they made their way through Cosmodon, Fairbanks sighed, asking if they might take a rest. But Mograine chuckled, shaking his head, replying that Fairbanks' frequent resting, coupled with the harsh winter, had already added several days to an already lengthy journey. "If we take much longer, the plague will circle the known kingdoms twice before we return," he said with a grin. Fairbanks hesitated, then added, "If I may be so bold, General Abendis showed apprehension regarding our quest. He voiced particular concern over your trusting of the dwarves." "I have noted a growing faction within our order, Fairbanks, one led largely by Abendis himself. A faction intolerant of what they deem to be the lesser races. It disturbs me, old friend. It is not befitting a paladin to treat others unjustly based on their heritage. I can assure you our dwarven friends have no nefarious intentions. They care little for the affairs of man. They would much rather explore their own history. And when it comes to masonry and engineering, none are better at delving into the bowels of the earth and sharpening it to their purpose." As he finished speaking, Alexandros and Fairbanks crested the hill they had been climbing, and there, carved into the mountain, stood Ironforge, its massive gates rising proudly from the stone, hinting at the vast underground city within. Finally reaching the gates after more hours of travel, Alexandros approached the dwarf guard and spoke firmly. "Please inform the good King Magni that Alexandros Mograine and his trusted advisors seek an audience." The guard gave a respectful nod, though his face carried a note of warning. "Aye. The king has just returned, but tread lightly, Master Mograine. His mood is sullen." Later that day, Alexandros and Fairbanks were led through the carved stone halls of Ironforge, torches flickering against the ancient walls as they were ushered into the throne room to meet with King Magni Bronzebeard. The dwarf king, his brow furrowed and his shoulders heavy with grief, looked up as they approached. "Have you heard any news from Lordaeron?" Magni asked, his voice deep and edged with tension. Alexandros inclined his head respectfully. "Before leaving, we were told that Prince Arthas had been recalled from Northrend by his father, King Tyrannus. But beyond that, the only thing we know is that the Scourge remain unchecked, rampaging across the land." My brothers have finally agreed to use the orb as a weapon against those monsters. Magni's fist clenched slightly as he stood in front of them. My own brother Muradin was in Northrend on an expedition. He knew Arthas, they were old friends. And thanks to Arthas, Muradin is now dead. Alexandros and Fairbanks lowered their heads in shared sorrow. You have our deepest condolences, King Magni, Alexandros offered softly. But Magni shook his head sharply, his grief simmering in hard resolve. Condolences won't bring back my brother, but crafting a blade with the sole purpose of killing these undead bastards, while it won't bring him back, it will ease the pain. Feels a bit like spitting in Arthas' eye. He straightened in his seat, his eyes glinting with determination. It'll take time to forge, but I'll get it done, and it'll be like no weapon you've ever seen before, and likely, there will never be one like it again. Some believe that Master Dwarven blacksmiths possess the uncanny ability to impart emotions into the blades they shape. Magni never put much stock in such claims, but now, as he stood alone at the Great Forge, the orb glowing faintly in his hands, the king found himself thinking of his brother, of Muradin, the sibling he would never see again. Magni gripped his hammer and with a deep breath, summoning every ounce of his rage, his fury, his thirst for vengeance, he called upon those emotions, willed them into the metal before him. With a mighty roar, a war cry that echoed through the vast expanse of the forge, Magni brought his hammer down again and again, sparks flying in a fiery dance as steel met steel. He hammered with all the strength in his heart, every strike a promise of retribution, until at last the blade was done. Alexandros and Fairbanks looked over, hearing Magni say the blade was done. He stood holding the completed weapon, its surface gleaming with a light that seemed to pulse with life. A griffin rider came, Magni rumbled quietly. He brought word. King Tyrannus is dead, killed by Arthas' own hand. His voice softened only briefly. You have my condolences, though I know they won't bring back your king. But perhaps this blade, perhaps it will administer some justice, return some semblance of order to the turmoil that grips your kingdom. Tyrannus was a good man, and the dwarves of Ironforge will mourn his passing. With solemn reverence, King Magni handed a magnificent sword to Alexandros. The two men stood in stunned silence, their minds reeling from the devastating news. Shock and confusion filled their faces, but it was King Magni's steady voice that pulled them back to the moment. If I were you lads, I'd see to me home and family, the war will keep. Magni advised, his tone both firm and understanding. Alexandros snapped to attention, the weight of those words striking him like a hammer blow. Family, yes, yes, we must make haste. Thank you, good king. You may rest assured I will make good use of this. I will honor Muradin's memory. Without wasting another second, Alexandros and Fairbanks mounted their steeds and sped off toward home. They rode with all the urgency they could muster, the cold wind biting at their faces and the winter road stretching endlessly ahead. Yet no matter how fast they galloped, Alexandros felt it was too slow, agonizingly slow. His mind raced with every hoofbeat, his heart pounding with a growing dread. If anything had happened to his boys, no power in this world or beyond could contain his fury. Several days later, under the pale glow of moonlight, they finally arrived. The familiar silhouette of Alexandros' home came into view, shadowed against the dark night. As they drew closer, a knot of dread twisted in Alexandros' chest. Urging his horse forward, he leapt from the saddle before the steed had even stopped, rushing up to the steps and throwing the door wide open. Darian, Renault, he bellowed, his voice echoing through the darkened house. Silence answered him. Frantic, Alexandros tore through the rooms, searching, calling, pleading. Then his eyes caught something. The glint of metal in the faint lamplight. A knife was stabbed into the wood, and carved into the surface in rough, jagged letters was a single word: Hearthglen. Alexandros felt his breath catch. He knew exactly where he needed to go. Without a second thought, he turned on his heel, ready to storm back out into the night. Before he could reach the door, Fairbanks called out, his voice urgent. Gripping the newly forged blade in his armored hand, Alexandros felt its weight, not just the steel, but the raw purpose forged into every inch of it. The weapon pulsed with power. Without a word, he stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Fairbanks' shoulder and moving him out of the way. Step aside, Fairbanks. I will handle this. In the next breath, the battlefield erupted. The Scourge closed in, grotesque forms snarling and clawing their way toward him. But Alexandros moved like a force of nature. With a single devastating swing, he cut through the oncoming undead, the blade slicing through rotted flesh and brittle bone as if they were nothing. The light-infused weapon blazed with righteous fury, and everywhere it struck, The undead were reduced to smoldering ash. What had been a deadly assault was over in moments. The battlefield left eerily silent, save for the faint crackle of the still settling dust. Breathing deeply, Alexandros turned, eyes alight with a fierce, almost reverent fire. He looked to Fairbanks and spoke, his voice ringing with conviction. "This blade, Fairbanks, it feels as much a part of me as the blood that runs through my veins. It is purely, truly an instrument of destruction, a beautifully lethal creation that leaves nothing but charred bone in its wake." His grip tightened, a sharp grin flickering across his battle-worn face. "I will call it the Ashbringer." Making his way to Hearthglen with haste, Alexandros cut through the chilled air, Fairbanks following closely behind, both fueled by the hope that Darian and Renault were safe and sound. At Hearthglen, the soldiers were gathered, tense and restless, speaking in hushed tones about how they could possibly stop the plague. Abendis and his daughter Bridget stood among them alongside Satan Dothrahan, Asilian, Doan, and a handful of other soldiers. "We need to hunt down and kill Arthas," Bridget said, her voice sharp and determined. But Satan calmly responded, "The plague will continue to spread whether Arthas is alive or not. The northern provinces have now become the plague lands. The cities overrun by the Scourge are being used by the undead to propagate this epidemic. Stratholme and Anderhall are among the worst. We should focus our attentions there." While Bridget strongly believed that they needed to kill Arthas due to his actions, the rest of the group believed there were more immediate threats to deal with, ones closer to home than Arthas himself. Doan nodded and added, "We must focus on containing this plague." Just then there were footsteps behind them, and Alexandros' voice chimed in saying, "Then let's stop talking about it and set to it." Darian ran forward and threw himself into his father's arms, hugging him tightly. Alexandros smiled warmly and said, "I got your message, boys. Well done. You don't know how relieved I am to see the two of you safe." Renault, a grin spreading across his face at his father's return, added, "Talon Fordring offered us his lands for their sanctuary." Looking to Talon, Alexandros said, "I served in the Second War with your father, Talon. No matter how things may have turned out, the Tyrion I knew was a good man. Now, where are the rest of the knights? Surely this is not all that's left of the Order of the Silver Hand." Being informed that this was all that remained of their once proud order, Alexandros listened grimly as the knights delivered more somber news. Uther too had fallen, cut down by Arthas himself. Disease and death had claimed the northern lands, with no sign of slowing or mercy. But Alexandros, with determination in his voice, lifted his gaze and spoke with ironclad confidence. The weapon he now bore was unlike any before it, and it was time, he declared, to start taking back what they had lost. The surviving Knights of the Silver Hand rallied to his call. Together they set out to stem the tide of plague and scourge that had overrun their lands. Battle after battle, they carved a path through the corrupted countryside. Like a raging inferno, they rode with fury and purpose, cutting down undead horrors wherever they were found. At the heart of that blazing charge was Alexandros. His name soon whispered across the kingdoms with awe and reverence. He became known not just as a warrior, but as something more, the Ashbringer. His deeds became legend, and soon, the legend became the man. Now they approached the ruined gates of Stratholme, their greatest challenge yet. They were as prepared as they could be, mounted atop their war horses, eyes set on the once great city now overrun by the Scourge. But as they neared the gates, Abendis felt it, a wrongness in the air. The fires that had ravaged Stratholme still burned fiercely, but they were not natural flames. There was something else here, something dark and malevolent keeping the fires alive. Something waiting in the heart of the ruin. Abendis is right, Darian. This could be unlike anything we have yet faced. I would not think less of you for turning away, Alexandros said, his voice low but steady as he looked ahead, ensuring nothing was going to surprise him. Darian, however, stood firm, his young face resolute. "I can sit idle no longer," he replied, determination shining in his eyes. Alexandros gave a small, proud nod before turning to his eldest. "So be it. Renault, you are to watch your brother at all times. Protect him. Am I understood?" "Yes, father," Renault answered, his voice carrying the weight of the responsibility he now bore. As the group pressed deeper into the heart of the burning city, an unnatural stillness surrounded them. The fires blazed fiercely, yet the houses showed no sign of crumbling further. The flames licked the wood eternally, their smoke thick and choking, casting the streets into a perpetual haze. Now and then the sharp crack of burning timber echoed through the silence, surprisingly loud, like sudden gunfire shattering the eerie quiet. Every creak, every snap set their nerves further on edge. It was Talon who finally broke the tense silence. "Why do I suddenly feel like a rat in a maze?" he muttered uneasily. "Hush, Talon. Be ready for anything," one of the soldiers snapped back, eyes darting nervously across the flickering shadows. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a sharp clatter came from behind a nearby gate. A realization hit them all at once. They were rats in a maze, and the trap had just been sprung. From the shadows, the Scourge attacked, charging fast and relentless, their grotesque forms pouring into the narrow streets as more clawed and shrieked their way closer, closing in on the knights with terrifying speed. With the Scourge charging like a tidal wave of death, Alexandros opened his mouth to shout commands, trying to rally his men into formation. But before he could finish his sentence, a nearby building groaned under the weight of the spreading fire and collapsed, its heavy beams crashing down and splitting Alexandros and Satan from the rest of the group. Debris rained down, choking the air with dust and flame. Satan reacted swiftly, his horse rearing back as he pulled away from the collapsing structure. Alexandros twisted sharply away from the collapse, and before he was able to join Satan, his eyes darted to the wave of Scourge closing in on him. Satan's gaze flicked back, seeing Alexandros squaring himself against the undead, and in that crucial moment, he failed to notice the second horde rushing directly toward him. Before Satan could react, they were upon him. Clawed hands ripped him from the saddle, dragging him to the ground. Kicking and slashing, Satan fought with everything he had, desperately searching for an escape, using his mace to knock back or attempt to kill what undead he could. Spotting a narrow doorway nearby, he surged forward, shoving past the snarling ghouls and forcing himself into the building. With a grunt, he slammed the door shut behind him, his chest heaving as he caught his breath, while the undead pounded on the door trying to break in. For a moment, there was a sense that he could recuperate. But as Satan's eyes adjusted to the dim interior, a cold realization crept over him. The real danger was already inside. Looking behind him, Satan barely managed to whisper a single panicked word before a cold hand clamped over his mouth. His eyes widened in terror as a shadowy figure said a single word to make Satan lose consciousness. "Sleep," it murmured, and before Satan could struggle, darkness overtook him, his body crumbling as he was forced into a deep, unnatural slumber. Meanwhile, the battle outside raged on. The knights fought desperately to stay alive amid the burning ruins and swarming undead. Brigida Bendis barked sharp orders over the clash of steel and the shrieks of the Scourge. "Clear a path through the rubble," she commanded, her voice fierce. "We need to find another way out, quickly!" Suddenly, a voice rang out in warning, a desperate shout directed at Darian, but the cry came too late. An undead mage unleashed a surge of crackling energy, striking Darian squarely and sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. Renault's eyes flashed with fury as he leapt to his brother's defense. With a fierce swing of his mace, he smashed into the twisted mage, felling the creature for the moment and standing protectively over Darian's fallen form, his breath ragged, his heart pounding as the battle threatened to swallow them all. Back with Satan as he slowly stirred back to consciousness, his vision swimming as he blinked against the dim light. As the haze cleared, his eyes widened in shock. Seated before him on a massive stone chair was a towering figure, clad in ornate gold and black armor streaked with green. Horns curled from its head, blue skin glinting under the torchlight, and vast, leathery wings stretched out behind it, casting eerie shadows across the room. You are Legion," Satan rasped, pushing himself up slightly from the ground but not yet to his feet, still dazed and trying to steady his breath. He was waiting for the right moment to grab his hammer, but was ready the instant he needed it. The creature let out a low, dark chuckle. "My kind are called Nathrazim, dreadlords in your tongue, but perhaps Tal-Katoon would be more fitting. It means unseen guest in our language. Fitting, because I have existed here between the worlds of the living and the dead, awaiting a moment such as this, under the very noses of the Scourge, without their slightest suspicion." Satan's jaw tightened as he slowly pushed himself fully to his feet, his hand closing firmly around the hilt of his hammer, feeling its familiar weight ground him. Satan didn't want to hear another word. With a defiant roar, he surged forward, seizing the hammer in both hands. "Make your peace now, demon," he bellowed as he hurled himself at the dreadlord, intent on delivering a killing blow. With a surge of righteous fury, Satan lunged, aiming to end the Nathrazim in a single decisive strike. His hammer crashed down with bone-shaking force, splintering a massive hole in the stone chair where the dreadlord had been seated. But the creature was swift, unnaturally swift. In the blink of an eye, it had darted behind Satan, its clawed hand seizing the paladin's head in a vice-like grip. "Know that I am Balnazar," the dreadlord murmured, his voice a dark whisper that curled through the air like smoke. "Know as I drink your life, that I will take up residence in this weak shell your soul once called home. Know that I will corrupt and destroy everything and everyone you have ever loved." Satan let out a blood-curdling scream of agony, his body convulsing as the dreadlord's power tore through him. But no one could hear his cries. No one was close enough to help. His pain echoed unheard in the shadows. Back with the knights, the struggle continued. General Abendis led the charge, carrying Darian on his back as the group finally forced a path through the rubble. With the way cleared, they rushed forward, desperate to escape the nightmare closing in around them, each step a prayer for survival in the chaos they had been thrust into. Alexandros charged forward, shattering through a weakened wood wall that blocked his path. Splinters rained down around him as he stumbled into an open space. His eyes darting to the right, there, just beyond the smoke and chaos, stood a gate leading out of the city. But his heart sank. It was barred, sturdy, and time was running out. The guttural roars of the Scourge echoed behind him, drawing closer with every heartbeat. Suddenly, a voice called out behind him. Alexandros felt a hand on his shoulder as his eyes beheld a surprise. Satan stood there, or so it seemed, his familiar form emerging from the haze. Before Alexandros could question anything, Abendis rushed up, Darian slung across his back. Alexandros' eyes widened, his breath catching. He wanted to ask, to demand about his son's condition, but there was no time. They had to move. With a sudden brutal cry, Satan raised his mighty hammer and smashed it against the barred gate. After a few swings, the wood and iron groaned, splintered, and then exploded outward under the sheer force. The path beyond flung open. Without hesitation, Alexandros rallied the group, ushering them through the shattered gate. Together, they fled into the dense woods. The trees swallowed them from sight as they escaped into the night. Away at last, from the relentless claws of their undead pursuers. Only once the darkness enveloped them did they dare stop, sinking to the ground to catch their breath, safe. At least for now. The group set up camp that night, their weary bodies gathering around a flickering campfire, with tents pitched in a rough circle for what little protection they could muster. Alexandros knelt beside Darian, lying pale and unconscious on a bedroll. The boy's face was still, his breath faint. Asilian spoke quietly from the opposite side of the tent, his voice carrying gently across the space. "I fear that the sorcery runs deep, brother. Deeper than our abilities to heal it. Only his faith can carry him through now." Alexandros clenched his fists, rage bubbling up inside him. Without another word, he stormed out of the tent, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes fell on Renault, and in a flash of anger, he came up from behind his eldest, his right hand balling up the fabric of Renault's shirt at the chest. "How did you let this happen?" he demanded, his voice shaking with fury and pain. Bridget Abendis rushed forward, her voice firm yet trying to soothe. "It's a miracle any of us walked away, Alexandros." Before the situation could erupt further, Satan intervened, stepping in to pull Renault gently away. "A miracle indeed. Come, Renault, let your father calm down." Satan's steady hand on the boy's shoulder guided him away, giving Alexandros the space to gather himself. Eventually, Alexandros lowered himself onto the log beside the campfire, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Across from him sat Talon, watching him quietly through the dancing firelight. "Renault was in danger too, you know," Talon offered softly. Alexandros turned his weary gaze toward him. "You think I show favoritism?" Talon raised his hand, slightly shaking his head. "I didn't mean any disrespect." Alexandros let out a slow breath, a faint bitter smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'll favor you with a story, Talon. The night Darian was born, he was born still. He made no movement, he made no sound. In a panic, I rushed out to the stream near our home. I plunged Darian into the icy waters, and to my astonishment, to my delight, he began flailing. And then he cried out, the most exquisite sound I have ever heard. I ran back into the house to tell Elena that our son had survived, only to find that she had not." His voice grew softer. "When I look into Darian's eyes, I see my wife. Losing him would be like losing her all over again. And that is a thought I cannot bear. As long as Darian lives, A part of Elena lives as well. Perhaps it is unfair of me, but that is how I feel. The campfire cracked quietly as the words hung between them, heavy and raw. Slowly, one by one, the group settled into their tents, making sure to rest for the day to come. Day broke gently over the camp, the first rays of sunlight spilling across the tents. Darian stumbled out, shielding his eyes as the blinding light met his still aching body. He blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, when suddenly Alexandros was upon him, crossing the distance in a heartbeat, wrapping his arms tightly around his son in a fierce embrace. "It's over now. You're safe. I love you, son. With all that I am, all I was, all I ever will be," Alexandros whispered, his voice trembling with raw relief and emotion. A short distance away, Renault watched the reunion in silence. His jaw tightened slightly, his eyes narrowing as a storm of jealousy began to brew quietly within him. A few days later, back in Hearthglen, the knights gathered in a tense meeting, their expressions grim as they weighed their dwindling options. Among them stood a large, broad-shouldered man with brown hair, an eye patch over his right eye, and thick sideburns that framed his mustache, named Maxwell Tyrosus. He rose to his feet and declared, "I tell you, our numbers are too few. We must look to recruiting among the night elves, dwarves, and gnomes if we are to retake our fallen cities." But his words immediately sparked a chorus of disagreements, voices rising in protest around the table. Renault, however, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "What right do we have to judge the other races?" Another knight, his eyes hard and unyielding, answered sharply, "It is our light-given right to do so." Alexandros spoke up, his voice calm but commanding, cutting through the rising tensions. "If the other races wish to offer help, then we should accept it. But for now, we will make do with what we have." His words settled over the gathered knights like a steady hand. High General Abendis spoke up. "We have not considered the city of Tyr's Hand to the northeast. It is a city of churches that has managed to hold out against the Scourge, last I heard. Their faithful citizens would make for strong allies." From across the room, Doan added sharply, "We cannot forget the free-willed Forsaken gathering in the ruins of Capital City, led by a fallen ranger named Sylvanus Windrunner." Murmurs rippled through the knights, heads nodding in grim agreement. There was no question, they all believed those undead should be dealt with, sooner rather than later. Rising to his feet, Alexandros brought the meeting to a close with a powerful statement, his eyes sweeping across the room. "We will confer with the good people of Tyr's Hand, we will raise an army, and we will wipe out these free-willed undead. They are not a threat now, but we cannot allow them to become one, not in our own backyard." That night, beneath the pale moonlight, Balnazar, still hidden behind his guise as Satan Dothrahan, sat alone in a shadowed corner of the camp. With deliberate precision, he drew a dagger across his wrist, letting dark, tainted blood drip slowly into a waiting bowl etched with infernal runes. As the bowl filled, he leaned in, his voice a sinister whisper. "Alexandros intends to attack the Forsaken. He is strong-willed, a man of deep faith, incorruptible." From within the bowl, a hollow, echoing voice responded. "What of those closest to him?" Balnazar's lip curled into a sly, wicked smile. "The youngest son displays the same conviction as his father. The oldest, however, possesses a darker turn of soul." The voice inside the bowl hummed approvingly. "Good. Win him to our cause. Eliminate the threat Alexandros poses without revealing your hand. Lady Sylvanas thinks to have me under her thumb, and so it must be for now. In time she will learn that Varimathras is no one's pawn." Balnazar inclined his head slightly, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "The Legion shall devour all, dear brother, and the final gambit shall commence, with the death of High Lord Alexandros Mograine." That's going to do it for this one. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for checking it out. See you in the next one. Take care of yourself.